In a rustic old hall in Detroit they prayed in the Maritime Sailors Cathedral. The church bell chimed till it rang 29 times for each man on the Edmund Fitzgerald.
Believe it, Darrell, season 4. Started out as an experiment, had no idea where it was going to go, what it was going to do, but here we are, going on 4 years later and blasting off with more Edmund Fitzgerald. You ready?
I am as ready as I can be, my good man.
And you're coming up on a birthday, right?
Halloween. 76.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm not getting old. I am getting old, but just last week I went to an antique shop. They put a price tag on me and put me in the window. You know?
No takers, I guess.
But I did go to the doctor, and I said, "Doctor, is it arthritis?" And he goes, "No, it's early rigor mortis."
These are not good signs coming up on your 76.
Oh, man.
Spirit of 76 here. We're getting older, but we're not getting old. That's the way I look at it. Don't let the old man in.
I had that carpal tunnel surgery in April, and next week it'll be 6 months, and I'm going to start playing guitar again. And because I couldn't bend my hand around. You know, it's doing a lot better. And you know, some people say, "What are you doing that for? You're getting too old to boogie." I says, "Hey, I can still boogie. It just hurts to do it." You know.
What is it about the Edmund Fitzgerald that keeps coming back? I mean, what is it for you? I mean, your uncle lost his life on the ship, but
and so did my dad. That's the underlying thing. Both of them. It affected everybody in my family. You got to remember, Uncle Grant went through the storm coming up Lake Superior. My dad's at anchor in the St. Mary's River. Both anchors down, engine half speed just to sit still. Cousin Alan's coming up Lake Michigan. I think he was on the Roche or the Thayer.
In the same storm, though.
Same identical storm within about 150 miles of each other. I'm so glad that when you called and wanted to do an interview, because I had just put it on the back burner for so long. And now that I've started digging into this stuff, I keep coming up with new stuff that I found that's in the Coast Guard report. But who reads these things? Are dry as toast. You know what I mean? You got to really read them a couple, 2 or 3 times to get them.
You're just the guy for that, because I'm not.
Yeah, well,
I appreciate your research.
Yeah, and I found some very interesting things here. And but to keep digging, and I want everybody to please. First of all, thanks for everybody for Don't forget to subscribe and hit that subscribe button, and the like button. But you can't turn this off. At least I can't. Since I was in the 3rd grade when we took that lake fighter trip, the old man was first assistant on the Armco. That went from Toledo to Silver Bay and back. We got home movies. You remember the old 8mm movie things?
Of course.
We're going right by where they're building the Fitzgerald, and she's about half done. You can see her, and we're all waving, and there's the Fitzgerald in the back. And I was so proud because that was going to be the biggest ship ever built in the Great Lakes, and it was my dad's company, and I was real proud of that. And we followed it, and having been on the boat myself, and Dad was chief on it, and Tom was porter on it, and it was a big part of our life. And I don't like some of the things that I've read in this report that have just been whitewashed under the table, and that's what I'm going to say right now. No way am I disparaging the builders of the boat or the architects that designed the boat, or what I'm saying, the weather service. I mean, I'm just going to present the facts as it was presented to the Coast Guard. So I'm not trying to piss anybody off or anything like that. No disrespect to the family members. Well, you'll see when I get into it. It'll all make sense. Yeah.
Your uncle Grant, Ralph Grant Walton, went down on the Fitzgerald. He was an oiler. Grant was your father's brother.
That is correct.
And when you say your father lost his life, he didn't actually go down on the Fitzgerald, but he never fully recovered from it, and it was the beginning of the end for him. Is that fair?
Like I said, he died in 1984 physically, but he actually died November 10th, 1975, years before his actual death, because he just never could get over it. He just couldn't do it. He got his brother the job. He knew most of them guys that worked on it for years.
He got his brother the job on the Fitz. I mean,
let me tell you this quick
that's
story.
going to stay with
Exactly. What am I? About a sophomore in high school. The old man is first assistant engineer somewhere. And like I said, they used to come out, because it took 12 hours to unload these boats. You know, the Hewletts, the big Hewletts, like this, you know. They'd come out to the house, 3 or 4 cases of beer. McSorley himself was at our house. Half the guys that went down on that boat would come out to the house. Like I said, these guys were his personal friends. They did this stuff. And after the Fitz, they got where you couldn't drink no more on boat, you know. But before that, they'd go up the street and they'd tie one on, whatever port they were in, you know. It just was a party. And because you got to remember, most of them guys were World War II veterans. They went through pure hell. You ain't going to tell some veteran you can't drink a beer when he gets off work. He'll throw your ass over the side, you know.
Sure.
I mean, that's a way. Pardon my French. I don't mean to cuss. Sorry.
No, that's all right.
But that's
Sailors
these were
do
rough.
cuss.
They were rough and tough, tumble people.
I mean, if you survived World War II, a lake freighter, it was nothing to get on one and go sail off, you know.
That's why I think he took it so hard, because his friends were lake freighter people. So these lake freighter people hung together. And when he retired and they moved to Titusville, Florida, they lived right down the road from Captain Al Kennedy, who was a Columbia captain. So all these years they hung together because they had a common interest. They talked shop some and they talked about it, but it was nice to get off the boat for 4, 5, 6, 7 hours and just be a human being again and not just a worker. Man, you're on 4 on, 8 off watch, you know, except when I was shoveling coal, they couldn't keep people on the job, so we had to work 6 and 6. It was a hand bomber too. It didn't have stokers. You had to actually physically do it. So yeah, he never got over it, and so the families always felt that.
Was it coming in from the top or was it coming in from the bottom? I believe it was coming in from both places. How much or how little, we'll never know. I mean, are you in agreement on that? It was. I mean, they had 2 vent covers that were gone off, possibly coming in through the hatches. That we can talk about if they were fastened down or not. I know we have before. So I think it was coming in from both places. We know the bilge pumps were going nonstop and not keeping up. It was sinking, yes.
One of the things I want to get into, and I think it's going to answer your question right now, if I may, okay. The comment sections are important. Folks at home, when you leave comments, you know, we read them, and we really do. And there's some really wonderful comments out there. And I would like to read part of a comment from a guy, okay? His last name is Evans, okay? And let me just read a paragraph or 2. I sailed on the Fitz as a deckhand in the spring of 1974 briefly. My experience and what I saw was that the 3 forward hatches on the starboard aft corners would not lay flush with the coamings. And number 3 hatch was so bad you had to get on it and bounce up and down to get the clamps on. And once clamped down, it would still have space between the hatch and the coamings, as would the other 2. And he assumes that that's probably from hitting the dock and stuff, maybe is warped the boat, but even though we know better.
That's super important information we had not yet heard.
Oh, buddy, we ain't even done yet, pal. Stick
just
with me. Okay.
Heating up.
Okay, here we go. I can only assume this problem was caused by the structural damage in the area that hit the dock too hard on occasion, reported by the Coast Guard. All 1,400 plus Kestner clamps on the Fitz needed adjusting, and this couldn't be done because all the adjustment bolts and nuts had been painted years earlier and now were nothing more than chipped paint and rust. Were probably never readjusted the entire life of the Fitz. With all this wear and tear these clamps are taken over the years, they were next to worthless, absolutely worthless. For him to say something like that, there was so out of adjustment that any wave movement, I mean, if you got this much space between the hatch and the coaming, you get waves over the thing, it's gonna get in that forward hatches, okay?
Well, you referenced that very subject in our video last year when you said after all the twisting and turning the Edmund Fitzgerald took over the decades, riding hard in the storms as McSorley did, at the twisting and turning, that potentially the hatch covers or hatches themselves were warped and could not be clamped down entirely 100%. It's not that they were negligent and didn't go out there and clamp everything down because they were heading into a gale, which eventually went storm and hurricane. You could not clamp them down from all the twisting, turning, and warping the way she was pounded over the decades, fully loaded as she was in storms, and I mean, that takes its toll.
He also remembers standing on the hatches and bouncing up and down on them. And when he did, the clamps would just fall off. Because you couldn't snap. Most of them, we'd snap them down.
This comes from a guy that sailed.
Yeah, sailed in April of 74. Now, by the way, folks at home, I would recommend highly get this book, The Trial of the Edmund Fitzgerald. You got it?
Got it.
The official report was about, 150, 170 pages long, but this contains the testimony of all the witnesses. And they couldn't put all that in a report, or your report would be 1,500 pages long. And it's, like I said, it's dry as toast anyway for 150 pages.
Which is something we really haven't covered, the testimonies from
you're going to get off on this.
So I guess we're going to go there today.
Yes, we're going there right now. Let's talk the last time she had her 5-year inspection, when they put her in dry dock. It was on April 9th, 1974, through April 20th of 1974. Now, I've got a message into Mr. Evans here, because he said he was on her in the spring of 74, right? When they fit this boat up, March is when they're usually fitting them out, right? So if you're going to dry dock on April 9th, I doubt you're going to run trips. You're probably going to go right to dry dock, okay? So I'm guessing he was on there after the dry dock inspection. I don't know. I've got a message into him. He hasn't got back to me yet. So, Mr. Evans, if you're out there, would you be so kind as to respond to that? I'd be most appreciative. Now,
that's some key evidence. I don't know how I missed that in the comments, because I read every comment on every video, movie I
5
make.
or 6 times down.
I don't know where I missed that, but he is offering firsthand evidence of someone who sailed on the ship 1 year prior to it going down, and he explained what he saw in regards to these hatch covers. That's really key information.
Right. Now, here we go. Charles Studstill was the hull inspector. 5 years she was doing her at the American Shipyard in Lorraine. And this examination, it's every 5 years, and it goes through this entire ship, okay? Entire ship. It tells exactly what's going on. And supposedly all they found was some minor stuff. And that's why it's so important. Are those hatches not sitting right after that hull inspection, or was that before and then they repaired everything? I don't know. We don't have records. And if
that seems like a major league off-season repair to me. If you have warped hatch covers and warped hatches themselves that don't align up anymore, that can't be an easy fix.
I wouldn't think so.
I mean,
but here he's on April.
That's going into dry dock, in the off-season, which is where it was headed. It never got there.
Well, all right. Could they fix that during that dry dock season, or up to the 20th? It doesn't say that here. It doesn't say. It just said that Mr. Will Janicart and Richard Phelps from Columbia, he was like the head chief for Columbia, okay? Remember him well. I remember him real well, okay? And they inspected the both tunnels, cargo holds, forepeak, afterpeaks, and the combings, of course, for the hatch covers. They inspected all that. As a result of this inspection, did you find any discrepancies? No, sir. Now, he's just telling us that he could stand on...
Is that testimony, or what is that?
Yeah, this is a testimony in a court of law of the United States Coast Guard Board of Inquiry. Didn't make the actual report for some reason. Anyway, that's why this guy, he went through pure hell to be able to get the entire transcript of the Coast Guard Board of Inquiry and Freedom of Information Act. He got it. That's why this book is so important. Okie dokie. Now, the inspection ABS inspector, they're looking for excessive wastage. In other words, if you've got a girder that's a half-inch thick, the beam or whatever, and it's wasted down to a quarter inch, well, that's unacceptable, because of rust and stuff. You got to replace it. Now, February, that was 1974. In February of 1975, James Gordon, another hull inspector of the Coast Guard Toledo, was doing the annual inspection for certification. And that's where they found some minor stuff. This was now in February of 75, okay? Excessive wastage, like I said, in the tunnels and the side tunnels and everywhere else, okay? Now, they ended up issuing that certificate of inspection on April 9th of 75. Here's a question by the Coast Guard. Mr. Spinner, had you been on board the Fitzgerald? We heard you were on board the Fitzgerald a month before it was lost. He said 6 weeks, approximately. So that puts at the last week of September, he's on the boat. What was your purpose of going now? Well, to pick up the list of winter work that we needed, okay? And they're going through this and they're going through that and whatever. We examined the propeller blade. Now, the only way I can think they did that, they had to balance the forward end down to get the prop out of the water a little bit, We examined the propeller blade and found out what we thought was a 6 or 7 inch crack in one of the blades. He said it didn't work changing, and nobody, all the other inspectors would tell us, even with die checking, and being a former Marine surveyor, I've done a lot of die checking on cracks on propellers and stuff, you know. You can see it real easy with this die checking. They said, well, we're not sure that's a crack or not. Why don't you go out and run a trip or two, and we'll look at it again. So I don't know how many trips there are, 1 or 2, whatever. And don't forget, she goes down on the 10th, and so we're looking at last week of September. They're going to run a trip or 2, so now we're probably looking at what, first, second week of October. They got back in. It was a 6-inch crack, and when they got back in at a later date, they found that the crack was progressing. It was definitely a crack, and a decision was made to change the blade. Yes.